one legendary figure also you met was Wickett Crickett. He's legendary in Houston. So can you tell us about him?
Yeah. Wickett Crickett was he's actually originally from New York, but he moved to Houston in the late 1970s, and there weren't really hip hop records coming out then. But since he had been in New York, he had been to the parties, he had been to the shows. He was hearing hip hop, and he was hearing the records that were developing into hip hop. He was part of the scene, and so he brought that enthusiasm with him to Houston. And in the late 1970s, early 1980s, he was rapping, he was freestyling, and he'd get up into he'd go up on stage with funk bands and boogie bands in Houston and perform with them and freestyle rap. And once more records started coming out, he started hosting shows. He started hosting talent shows and promoting rap music in Houston. And he's an MC, so his legacy is a little bit more fluid. He doesn't have the same legacy as somebody who released a lot of records does. He performed on a song with K-Rino, and he released his own 12-inch in 1996. But aside from that, he's really not featured on very many recordings, and so he gets a little bit lost in the mix for people outside of Houston. But for people inside of Houston, Wickett Crickett meant an enormous amount to so many people because he really put a lot of people on. He gave DJ Screw a really early DJ gig. He put Beyonce on early. He gave her a show. There's countless artists in Houston that will go back and say, oh, yeah, Wickett Crickett gave me my first show. He gave me my first opportunity. He's the one who let me get up on stage and do what I was doing and either let me fail or encouraged me or whatever it was. And so, yeah, he kept working. He died in 2015, but, he was working up until the last minute, basically, and he will never be forgotten in Houston. And so that's why I put his interview first in the book, because I wanted people to know that he may have not released the first record or recorded the first song or anything like that, but he was definitely one of the first people who was really pushing to say, hey, let's make Houston a hip hop city.
Yeah, for sure. One figure too was Raheem of the Area Ghetto Boys. A very important figure, Raheem, too, and very underrated, very overlooked too in Houston.
Yeah.
So can you tell us about him too?
Well, yeah, part of it was that Raheem was young. He was 15, 16 years old when he was signed to a major label. I think that the majors were coming around Houston looking for something, and they heard the Ghetto Boys, and that was a little too raw for them. It wasn't really what they were looking for at that time, but Raheem had a little bit more. He was cleaned up a little bit more. He was younger, so he wasn't as gangster. So he got a major label deal and released a record in 1988, and he was good looking and he was cocky, so the girls loved him and all the rappers hated him. And he'll be the one to tell you that. But as time went on, I think that he came back and he signed with Rap a Lot, and he did one more record, and then of course he was a member of the Black Monks years later, and then he eventually just kind of faded out of the business and wasn't making records anymore. But I think that time has been good to his records. When people go back and listen to his records now, I think people can go back and hear a newfound respect for what he was doing, even if they didn't appreciate it at the time, because his, like I said, his records were the first that were, widely available from Houston. The early Ghetto Boys records were around, but, if you didn't know where to go, you might not find them. But, whereas, with Raheem's records, you could go into pretty much any record store and bam, there it is. There's Raheem, Dance Floor. That was or the Vigilante. So I think, like I said, I think time has been kind to his legacy, in the sense that people going back and listening to his records realize, like, oh wow, he really did have something.
I remember Fugitive song. It was crazy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Social Box 2, Prince Johnny was the same level the earlier Ghetto Boys. Very, very overlooked by history, and they must get recognized as an earlier part of Ghetto Boys.
Yeah. Well,
yeah. Go ahead.
I was gonna say that's why I put him in the book, because I wanted people to know about him. You know.
Yeah. On a final note, can you tell us about the meeting with Mr. Scarface? Can you tell us about him and how it was to deal with him?
Oh yeah, he's hilarious. You know, he's a piece of work. He's really you know, I've met him several times over the years, and you know, you always sort of get a different impression of him. But you know, I don't know him that well, you know, at all. But you know, it seems like to me he's in a really good place, you know, because you know, he's all of the records that he's made over the last, you know, handful of years have been amazing, and you know, he seems to be you know, at peace with you know, I don't think the Ghetto Boys are ever going to make another record, but they do still do some touring, and they seem to be having